The rain never stopped on that island. It fell like a curse from the dark sky, washing the ground, filling the air with the smell of wet earth and salt from the sea. For 10 years, the human had lived under this endless storm, far away from any home, far away from any voice that would call him friend. His name was Daniel, but no one here spoke his name. To the alien women, he was not Daniel. He was only the human. They hated him. The first time they saw him, they spat at him, called him a beast, a mistake of the stars. When he tried to speak, they silenced him with whips made of glowing vines. When he reached out a hand for mercy, they struck it away. He learned quickly. Here, a human was lower than dirt. Still, they did not kill him. That mystery kept Daniel awake many nights. Why let him live if they hated him so much? Why feed him scraps of burned food? Why give him a hut of rotten wood instead of a grave? He remembered the day of his capture. His ship had crashed on the far side of the sea. He had swum for days, barely alive, until he reached their island. He thought he had found rescue. Instead, he found eyes filled with hate. They bound his hands, dragged him before their leader, and chained him to a pole. 10 years had passed since that day, and still he wore the invisible chains. Daniel's hut stood at the edge of the village, where the sea wind blew cold. The alien women never allowed him near the heart of their land. He was a shadow, a prisoner, under open sky. But Daniel was not broken. He had survived storms, hunger, and beatings. Each day he rose with the sun, gathered wood, hunted fish with sharp sticks, and built small fires to keep warm. The women watched from a distance, sneering, whispering, yet sometimes in their eyes, Daniel thought he saw something different. Not hate, not fear, something else he could not name. One evening, as the rain poured heavier than usual, Daniel sat by his weak fire, trying to keep the flames alive. His clothes were rags, his skin scarred from whips. He looked older than his years, but his eyes still carried fire. From the shadows, he heard movement. He turned quickly, his stick in hand like a weapon. A figure stood between the trees, tall, slim, and glowing faintly in the rain. An alien woman. Her silver hair stuck to her cheeks, her violet eyes fixed on him with a sharp, unreadable look. She did not speak. She only watched. Daniel's heart pounded. For 10 years, no one had come close without insult or blow. Why was she here? Was this a trick? Was she waiting for him to beg? Do it, Daniel said, his voice hoarse. If you came to strike me, then strike. I won't crawl. The woman tilted her head. For a moment, he thought she would leave. Instead, she stepped forward, her bare feet splashing in the mud. She looked at the weak fire, at the man sitting like a survivor among ruins. Her lips parted, as if to speak, but then she stopped. Another voice rang from the trees, harsher, angry. Leave him. Don't waste your eyes on the human. The woman froze. Then, without another glance, she turned and vanished into the rain. Daniel sat in silence, the fire crackling weakly. His heart was heavy, but also restless. Something had changed tonight. For the first time in 10 years, one of them had looked at him not with pure hate, but with hesitation. He did not know it yet, but this was the first crack in their wall. The island was cruel. The alien women loathed him. Yet deep in their hearts, something was shifting, something dangerous, something that would decide his fate. As the rain fell harder, Daniel stared into the fire and whispered to himself, 10 years, and maybe tonight, everything begins to change. The night swallowed his words, but the shadows around him carried secrets he could not yet see. Nights on the island were never quiet. The sea roared against the black cliffs, the wind howled through the trees, and the rain fell like endless needles. Yet sometimes, through all the noise, Daniel felt eyes on him, eyes that followed him even when no one stood near. At first, he thought it was madness. 10 years of loneliness could break any mind. But then he saw them, shadows moving between trees, faces pale in the moonlight, alien women, standing just far enough that he could not touch them, but close enough that he could see their eyes glowing faintly in the dark. They never spoke to him. They only watched. It happened more and more as the months passed. At night, when he returned to his broken hut, they were there, silent, still, like hunters waiting. He could hear their whispers sometimes, carried by the wind. Words in there. Strange tongue, sharp and fast, always followed by quiet laughter. Daniel could not tell if they were mocking him or studying him. One night, unable to bear it, he stood tall by his fire and shouted, "What do you want from me?" The trees swallowed his voice. The watchers melted into the shadows, vanishing without a trace. But the next night, they returned. Daniel tried to ignore them. He worked harder each day, fishing with sharpened stones, building traps for small animals, weaving vines to repair the roof of his hut. The alien women passed by during daylight, throwing him scraps, sneering as always. But at night, the silent watchers appeared again, their eyes never leaving him. He began to notice details. Some wore armor made of bone and crystal, but others stood barefoot, their long hair damp with mist. Some carried strange weapons, shaped like spears that pulsed with light, but most simply stared at him, whispering among themselves. One evening, as Daniel sat carving wood with a sharp stone, he heard footsteps closer than ever before. He looked up and froze. An alien woman stood only a few paces away. She was not the one from the night of the fire. This one was taller, her skin a deep bronze, her eyes a piercing gold. She had scars on her arms, proof of battles fought. For a long moment, she said nothing. Her gaze swept over his body, his rough hands, his scarred chest, his tired but unbroken eyes. Then she leaned forward slightly and whispered something. Daniel could not understand her words, but the tone was clear. It was not hate, it was curiosity. Before he could respond, another voice cut through the trees. A younger alien woman appeared, shouting in their tongue, her face burning with anger. The golden-eyed warrior turned sharply, spat a word back, and then both vanished into the darkness, leaving Daniel stunned. From that night on, the watchers grew bolder. He saw more faces, more eyes. Sometimes they stayed until the fire burned out. Sometimes he woke from sleep to find footprints circling his hut. It was no longer just hate that held him captive. Something else was happening. One dawn, Daniel went to the shore to gather driftwood. As he worked, he felt that same burning sensation eyes on his back. He turned quickly and saw 3 alien women standing on the rocks, watching him with sharp interest. One of them bent down, picked up a shell and tossed it toward him. It landed near his feet. Daniel stared at it. A gift, a test, a warning. When he looked up, they were already gone. That night, sleep refused to come. Daniel sat by the dying fire, listening to the rain. His heart beat hard in his chest, his mind racing. He had survived 10 years of hate, but this was different. This was a game he could not understand. Why did they watch him now? After all these years? Why did one of them whisper, another argue, and the third throw something at his feet? He was still their prisoner, still the man they loathed. But for the first time, Daniel felt the chains around him shifting, not breaking, not yet but moving. As the night deepened, he whispered into the dark, "If you are hunting me, then hunt. If you are testing me, then test. But know this, I will not fall." In the trees, unseen eyes blinked. The silent watchers did not leave, and somewhere in the shadows, a choice was being made. The rain had slowed that night, leaving the air heavy with mist. Daniel sat by the small fire outside his hut, carving a piece of driftwood with his stone blade. His body was tired, his scars burning from the day's work, but his mind was sharper than ever. He could feel them, the silent watchers. For weeks now, they had circled him in the shadows, sometimes one, sometimes many. Their eyes glowed faint in the dark, their whispers sharp like knives. But tonight felt different. Tonight, the air carried something heavier. Daniel did not wait long to learn what it was. Out of the mist, she stepped, the same silver-haired alien woman he had seen before, the one who had looked at him by the fire and then vanished when another voice called her away. Now she stood only a few paces from him, her violet eyes fixed on his face. Daniel's grip on the stone blade tightened. He had survived 10 years by trusting no one, not even the strange flicker of pity he thought he had once seen in her eyes. "Why are you here?" His voice was steady, low, carrying the weight of years of silence. She said nothing at first, her head tilted, as if she were studying him like a puzzle. Then, in halting words broken, But understandable, she whispered. Why do you not die? Daniel's heart jumped. She spoke his language, not perfectly, but enough. Because I refuse, he said, his voice cracked with defiance. If your people want me dead, they should have done it years ago. Her eyes softened. She took a cautious step forward. Her hand reached out slightly, not touching him, but close enough that he could feel the warmth of her skin against the cold air. Daniel's breath caught. Was this real or another cruel trick? But before either of them could move further, a sharp sound cracked the night. Stop. Another alien woman burst from the mist. Her armor glimmered in the weak firelight, her golden eyes blazing with fury. She was taller, stronger, and her presence alone made the silver-haired woman freeze. You break the law, the golden-eyed warrior hissed in their tongue, pointing her glowing spear at Daniel. He is not to be touched, not to be spoken to. He is filth. The silver-haired woman's lips trembled. She looked at Daniel, then at her sister. For a moment, Daniel thought she would back away. But instead, she did something no one had ever dared. She spoke again in Daniel's tongue. He is not filth. The words hung in the mist like fire. The golden-eyed warrior's face twisted with rage. She shouted something sharp in their language, and pulled her spear higher. For a heartbeat, Daniel thought she would strike him down. But then she lowered the weapon not at him, but at the silver-haired woman. You shame us. The warrior spat. If the council learns of this, you will be cast out. The silver-haired woman's eyes flashed with pain, but she did not move. She stood between Daniel and the spear, her chest rising and falling fast. Daniel could only stare. For 10 years, no one had defended him. For 10 years, he had been dirt beneath their feet, and now someone was standing for him. The golden-eyed warrior's gaze shifted, cold and cutting. This is not over, she warned. With a sharp gesture, she disappeared into the mist, leaving only silence behind. The silver-haired woman stayed. For one more moment, her eyes locked on Daniel's. Her lips moved, barely a whisper. Survive, she said. And then she, too, was gone. Daniel sat frozen by the fire, his heart pounding. The encounter had shaken him more than any beating, more than any trial of survival. For the first time, an alien woman had not only spoken to him, she had chosen him over her own people. But what did it mean? He stared into the flames, replaying her word again and again. Survive. It was not advice, it was a warning. From that night on, Daniel knew his captivity was no longer simple. The silent watchers were not only watching, they were dividing. Some still hated him, some wanted him gone, but at least one saw something more. And that choice had set a dangerous fire among them. The human was no longer just a prisoner. He had become something far more dangerous and unknown. The island would never be the same. The drums shook the air. Their deep, thunderous rhythm echoed through the alien village, rolling like storm waves crashing against cliffs. Fires burned high in the center square, throwing sparks into the night sky. Around the flames, the alien women gathered, hundreds of eyes glowing, hundreds of voices chanting in a language Daniel still could not understand. But he understood one thing. Tonight, it was his turn. The guards dragged Daniel forward, their grips like iron on his scarred arms. He stumbled into the firelight, his ragged clothes clinging to his wet skin. 10 years of survival had hardened him, but nothing had prepared him for the sight. The entire tribe had come to see him tested. At the far end of the circle, the golden-eyed warrior stood tall, her spear gleaming, her voice cut through the chants. The human defies death, she declared. He steals time that does not belong to him. Tonight, we show his weakness. The crowd roared with agreement. Daniel's jaw tightened. He had seen this moment coming. For weeks, the watchers had grown bolder. For weeks, whispers had followed him. Now, the council had chosen to end the question once and for all. But he had survived too much to simply kneel. What is this trial? He shouted, his voice rough but steady. If you want me dead, then kill me. Stop playing games. The golden-eyed warrior smirked. No games, a test. She lifted her spear and struck the ground. A deep rumble spread under Daniel's feet. The ground split open, and from the darkness below, they dragged up a beast. It was massive, Covered in scales that shimmered red under the firelight, its mouth split wide. Lined with jagged fangs, chains rattled around its neck, held by 6 warriors. Straining with all their strength, the beast snarled, its hot breath filling the square with the stench of blood and smoke. The crowd fell silent. "This creature," the golden-eyed warrior said, "has killed 10 of our hunters. No alien man has stood against it and lived. Tonight, we feed it something weaker." Her eyes burned into Daniel's, the human. The chains released. The beast lunged forward. Daniel barely had time to dive aside before the monster's jaws snapped shut where he had stood. The ground shook as the beast crashed into the earth, its claws tearing deep furrows in the soil. Daniel rolled, grabbing a broken spear someone had left near the fire. His heart pounded. His body screamed with exhaustion, but his mind was clear. This was not just a fight for life. This was his only chance to show them what a human truly was. The beast turned, its yellow eyes locking onto him. It roared, shaking the square, and charged again. Daniel stood his ground this time. At the last moment, he sidestepped, driving the broken spear into its side. The weapon snapped, but the beast howled in pain, stumbling. The crowd gasped. No alien had ever made the creature bleed. The fight dragged on, brutal and raw. Daniel dodged, rolled, struck with stones, fists, and whatever scraps he could find. The beast clawed his chest, tearing flesh, but still he rose. It bit into his arm, but he slammed a rock into its skull until it released him. Minutes felt like hours. The chants of the crowd turned into silence. Eyes widened, mouths opened. As the human, the one they had called weak, filth, prey, stood against the beast longer than any of their strongest warriors ever had. Finally, bloodied and gasping, Daniel climbed onto the beast's back. With a sharp shard of stone, he drove it into the soft flesh beneath its jaw. The monster thrashed, roared, then collapsed into the mud with a final shudder. Daniel fell beside it, too weak to stand. But the beast did not rise again. The square went silent. The golden-eyed warrior stepped forward, her face pale with disbelief. She stared at the dead beast, then at the human who still breathed beside it. For the first time, her voice faltered. This should not be possible. From the crowd, whispers rose, first in confusion, then in something else, not hatred, not mockery. Something Daniel had never heard directed at him before. Respect. Daniel lay in the dirt, blood soaking his rags, his chest heaving with every breath. He forced his eyes open, meeting the gaze of the silver-haired woman she had pushed through. The crowd, her violet eyes shining not with fear but pride, their eyes locked. She did not speak, but he understood her. Tonight, something had shifted. The alien women had wanted to see him broken. Instead, they had seen him endure. For 10 years, he had been their prisoner. Tonight, he had become something far more dangerous. In their eyes, he had become their equal, and that terrified them more than any beast. The beast's body still lay in the center of the village, rotting slowly under the endless rain. Flies circled it, and the smell of blood clung to the air, yet no one dared move it. It stood as a reminder, a warning that the human had done what no alien warrior could. Daniel felt the shift in the air almost immediately. For 10 years, every glance had been filled with hate. Every step near him had been a threat. But after the trial, things were different. Not openly, never openly. Yet in the silence, in the shadows, whispers began to stir. He heard them when he walked past. He killed it with his hands. No, man has done that. Maybe he is not as weak as we were told. Some voices carried admiration, others carried fear, and still others carried anger, sharper than ever before. Daniel worked alone at the edge of the village, repairing his hut. After the storm, his arm was bandaged with rough cloth, his chest scarred from the beast's claws, but he moved with the same stubborn strength that had kept him alive for years. He noticed small changes. A girl, younger than the others, left him a strip of dried meat on a stone near his fire. When he turned to thank her, she had already run off, vanishing between huts. Another night, he found a water skin placed near his sleeping mat. Clean water, not the dirty rainwater he always drank. And once, when he staggered carrying a heavy log, He swore he saw a pair of hands push lightly from behind before slipping away. Daniel said nothing, but he knew the whispers were becoming actions. Not everyone was pleased. The golden-eyed warrior, the one who had called for his trial, now watched him closer than ever. Her stare burned through him whenever she passed. She spoke louder in council meetings, her voice filled with venom. "He is not strong," she shouted to the tribe. "He is dangerous. He will poison us from within." But for the first time, not everyone agreed. Some looked away. Some even frowned at her words. The cracks were growing. One night, as the rain thinned and the fire burned low, Daniel felt movement. Again, he knew the watchers well by now. But this time, when he turned, the silver-haired woman stepped forward into the light. Her violet eyes glimmered. She looked nervous, her breath quick, but she did not turn away. "You should not be here," Daniel said, though his voice was softer now. She shook her head. "I must." Her words were broken, but clearer than before. She had been practicing. "You fight strong." "Why?" Daniel met her gaze. He wanted to laugh, to scream, to tell her of 10 years of pain. But instead, he spoke the truth. "Because I refuse to die for your hate." Her eyes widened, then softened. She sat across from him, close to the fire. For a long time, she said nothing, only listened to the rain. Then, quietly, she whispered, "Not all hate you." Daniel froze. The words were simple, but they shook him more than the trial, more than the beast, more than the chains. Not all. Before he could speak, she rose quickly, as if afraid of her own courage. "I go," she said, "but survive." Her hand lingered for a heartbeat near his arm before she vanished back into the shadows. The days that followed carried more whispers. He felt eyes that lingered longer, not just with hate. He caught smiles quickly hidden. He heard arguments in their tongue, voices raised, words sharp, cut off when he appeared. The tribe was no longer one voice. Some wanted him dead more than ever. Some wanted him forgotten. But a few had begun to wonder if the human was not their enemy at all. And Daniel, sitting by his fire under the endless rain, finally felt it. The balance had shifted. He was no longer just a prisoner on their island. He was a question, and questions, he knew, were far more dangerous than beasts. The council fire burned brighter than the stars. The alien elders sat in a half-circle, their tall crowns made of bone and crystal casting sharp shadows across the square. Behind them, the crowd pressed in, faces glowing, voices low, every pair of eyes fixed on the prisoner who had survived too long. Daniel stood in the center, his wrists bound with glowing chains. His body was weak, scars fresh, but his back was straight. He refused to bow, not even after 10 years. The golden-eyed warrior stepped forward. Her voice cut the night like steel. "The human has lived too long. He survived the beast, but that is not strength, it is corruption. His presence poisons us. Tonight, the council must decide, execution or exile into the sea." The crowd stirred. Some hissed in agreement, their hatred clear, but others whispered, uncertain. The beast's carcass was still fresh in their memories, and the whispers of change had already spread to far to silence. An elder rose, her voice deep and commanding. "For 10 years, he has been a prisoner. For 10 years, he has not begged. He has endured storms, hunger, and wounds. Perhaps this is not weakness. Perhaps it is something else." Murmurs swept through the crowd. Daniel felt their eyes on him, some sharp with hate, others heavy with doubt. He was no longer invisible. He was the fire they could not ignore. Suddenly, a voice broke the tension. "He must live." The crowd gasped. The silver-haired woman stepped into the circle. Her violet eyes burned with courage Daniel had only glimpsed before. Her face was pale, but her jaw was firm. The golden-eyed warrior's fury was instant. "Silence. You shame us all. You dare protect him." The silver-haired woman did not move. "He fought the beast when our strongest fell. He bled, yet rose. He did not beg. He did not break. He is not filth. He is human." The last word lingered in the air like a forbidden flame. Daniel's chest tightened. No one had spoken his kind aloud in years. Hearing it from her lips was like breathing after drowning. The crowd erupted. Some shouted in rage, others looked shaken. The council struggled to control the storm of voices. The golden-eyed warrior turned to the elders, her voice sharp with venom. If he lives, he will divide us. Already he poisons minds. Already he bends rules. If you do not act, you will lose everything. But the silver-haired woman stepped closer to Daniel, standing at his side. If you kill him, you kill honor. He survived what we could not. That truth does not vanish with his blood. It grows stronger. The two sisters faced each other, the golden-eyed burning with fury, the silver-haired burning with defiance. For the first time, the tribe saw the split made clear. The elders whispered among themselves, their voices low and grave. Finally, the eldest stood. The law says the human must die, but law is stone, and stone can crack. Tonight, we do not strike him. Tonight, we wait. But hear this. Human, one more step beyond your place, one more act of defiance, and your blood will feed the earth. The decision fell like thunder. The crowd roared in chaos, some in fury, some in relief. The chains on Daniel's wrists were unlocked, and he was shoved back into the dirt. But he was not executed. Not yet. That night, Daniel sat by his fire, his body trembling with exhaustion, but his mind alive. For the first time, he had seen it clearly. They were divided. One side wanted his death. The other side wanted something else. And in the middle, the council hesitated. The silver-haired woman appeared again, just beyond the firelight. Her voice was soft, but steady. Now, you see, they cannot choose, but we can. Daniel stared at her, his voice rough. Why risk yourself? Her violet eyes glimmered. Because change begins with choice. And then she was gone, leaving Daniel staring into the flames. He understood now. His survival was no longer just his fight. It was a question tearing their tribe apart. And soon, someone would have to choose which side of that question they belonged to. The morning came with silence. For the first time in 10 years, no rain fell. The island sky glowed faint gold, clouds breaking apart to reveal the sun. It was strange, almost wrong. Daniel stood outside his hut, staring at the sky as if it were a dream after a decade of storms. The silence felt heavy, like the world itself was holding its breath. The tribe gathered before the council fire. This time there were no drums, no chants, no roars of anger, only tense whispers. The elders had called for a final judgment. Daniel was led forward again, his arms bound with ropes instead of glowing chains. He noticed the difference. It meant they no longer feared his strength the same way, or maybe they feared something else now. The golden-eyed warrior stood ready, her spear bright in the sun. Her voice rang across the crowd. 10 years is enough. He divides us. He weakens us. End this before we fall apart. The silver-haired woman stepped forward, her body trembling, but her voice steady. No, he does not weaken us. He shows us strength. He fights storms, beasts, and hate, and still stands. To kill him is to kill the truth. The crowd stirred, louder this time. Some shouted in rage. Others nodded, silent but firm. The split was clear now. There was no going back. The eldest council member rose. Her voice was rough with age. Enough. We cannot hide behind whispers anymore. Tonight, we decide. Not the council, not the law, the tribe. The square went still. Daniel's chest tightened. He realized what she meant. This was not just judgment. This was something deeper, a choice. The crowd parted as the eldest lifted her hand. Step forward, she commanded. All who wish him dead. Dozens of women moved at once, their faces hard, their voices raised. The golden-eyed warrior was among them, her glare sharp as a blade. They filled half the circle, strong and fierce. Then the elders spoke again. Step forward, those who choose him. For a moment, no one moved. The air shook with silence. Daniel lowered his eyes. Maybe this was it. Maybe even after everything, he was still alone. Then he heard footsteps, soft, steady. The silver-haired woman walked into the circle. Her violet eyes did not waver as she stood by his side. Then another came, and another. Younger voices, older faces, warriors, healers. One by one, they stepped forward. Some shook with fear, but still they came. Soon, the circle was split into half against him, half with him. The elder looked at the divided tribe, her face grim. Then hear this, we can no longer call him prisoner. He is chosen. The words struck the air like thunder. The golden-eyed warrior shouted in fury, you betray our law. But the elder raised her hand. Law is broken when it blinds us, the human lives. Not as slave, but as part of us. The crowd erupted. Some screamed in anger, others wept. But the decision was final. Daniel stood frozen, the ropes falling from his wrists. He could hardly breathe. After 10 years of chains, 10 years of hate, 10 years of silence, he was not a prisoner anymore. He was something greater. He looked at the silver-haired woman. She met his gaze with quiet fire and whispered only one word, chosen. That night, the tribe lit fires not of judgment, but of unity. The storm clouds broke, and for the first time, stars shone above the island. Daniel sat among them, food and water placed before him not as scraps, but as offerings. Some still glared at him, some still whispered of his death, but others smiled small, uncertain, but real. He was no longer the human. He was Daniel again. The women who had once loathed him had chosen him. Not all but enough. And in their choice, Daniel felt something he thought he had lost forever. Hope. He lifted his eyes to the stars and whispered, 10 years, and at last, I am free. The night carried his words, and the tribe carried his fate. The human they had hated had become the one they could not live without. Asterisk.